I want to mention a few others that we'll be touching on in class, and then we'll call this tape a wrap. The first reference, very famous one, is to a collective of women that exist within Solomon's harem. Solomon has a reputation, which you might remember, of marrying an enormous quantity of women. What is it? Something like 600 wives and 300 concubines. A concubine is a lesser wife. King Solomon loved many foreign women along with the daughter of Pharaoh, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women. This is 1 Kings 11. From the nations concerning which Yahweh had said, you shall not enter into marriage with them, neither shall they with you, for they will surely incline your hearts to follow their gods. Among his wives, we're told, were 700 princesses and 300 concubines. 1,000 women. Now, allowing for the obvious Hebrew hyperbole, this is obviously a case of marriage for purposes of military alliance. He married all of 700 princesses. So these are women who were brought into his harem for purposes of military alliance. Maybe he casts a look at them once every few years. I mean, let's be practical here. But the primary purpose of these women is to establish and strengthen and expand Solomon's power and influence. However, in what we have already seen as a standard patriarchal ploy, the women are described, as was Eve, as will be Jezebel, we'll say in a moment, as a source of evil, religious pollution, and more generally, a source of temptation. And that's the way the women are portrayed. Solomon is known as the wisest of the kings, but even with his great wisdom, this is the thrust of the narrative here, even with his great wisdom, he is not able to resist the allures and the wiles of these foreign, other, different women. And the idea of women as other, as foreigner, as dangerous, comes out very, very strongly in this account. Now we're going to move outside the realm of David and his family, and actually up to the northern kingdom and a different dynasty, and talk about two women, a mother and daughter, who figure very prominently in these stories. The mother, of course, is Jezebel, whom we understand to be a Phoenician princess married to King Ahab in the northern kingdom. And she is, as we notice from the story, first of all, very strong and influential. And secondly, we see her as a source of religious defilement. She is a fanatical follower of a rival god to the God of Israel, whose name is Baal. And so she, as the narrative goes, the history is a good deal more complicated, but she introduces the religion of Baal, who is the Canaanite storm god, the worship of Baal and his consort Asherah. She introduces this worship into Israel and seeks to, by edict and very violent enforcement, to impose this religion on every Israelite. And the hostility against her in the passage is astounding. Ultimately, she is, and you'll be reading this, she is thrown from her window to smash her body on the ground, and then Jehu, the military commander who becomes king after he wipes out the royal family, drives over her body back and forth until her flesh is mashed into a jelly, and then he goes inside and has a meal. And then after his meal, he strokes his chin and he says, oh yeah, there's that woman out there. She is a king's daughter. Maybe he's wondering about foreign policy and his relationship to Phoenicia after this. So he goes outside and he finds that the dogs have eaten all of her body except for the palms of her hands and her skull and the soles of her feet, and he just has those pieces just cast out as garbage. And what Fuel and Gunn remark at, and I want you to pay careful attention to their comments about Jezebel, a wonderful example of counter-reading, but what they remark is the enormous hostility the narrator has, that he feels compelled not only to see Jezebel and her aims defeated, but to see her very body mutilated. And that's going to be very significant in our consideration. And finally, in good royal fashion, Jezebel marries her daughter off to the king of the southern kingdom known as Judah, and her name, the daughter of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, is Athaliah. And Athaliah, too, is portrayed as a, if you'll pardon my expression, a bloodthirsty bitch. When she finds out that her husband has been killed during a royal visit in the north, she proceeds to murder all her children and have herself declared queen and ruler over Judah. And this is, as I mentioned earlier, the only time that we have a non-Davidite, that is, somebody on the throne in Judah who is not a descendant of David. This is the only time we have such a figure ruling over Judah. She murders her children, she murders every possible rival to her power, and she sets herself up and rules in Israel for about 10 years. But unknown to her, the high priest in the temple in Jerusalem has hidden away an infant son of the former king who died in the north, and has been raising him in secret. And when he's about 6 years old, the priest brings him out and has him declared king. Athaliah sticks her head out the window and cries out, treason, treason, and she too is thrown from a window and killed. So once again we see the women as either being victims of the purposes of the men, or in these cases sources of wickedness, and those for whom the worst and most gruesome and mutilating punishments are only fit. But within the midst of that, we see perhaps traces of a society that has a significant role for women not fully reflected in the text. And that we'll consider in class. Thank you very much.